This is a video that will show you how to create a self-faced casing along the edge of a sleeve hemline and insert elastic into that. Let's go ahead and quickly look at our pattern real quick. It says that we have a 1-inch casing and we're going to be using 1/2-inch elastic, so this should hopefully easily fit into this space here. Another thing that we need to look at is that we have 5/8 inch seam allowances. Again, we have that stay stitching along the top, and it says along the bottom that we need to turn and press under 1/8 of an inch. So I just want to point out that I've already done that. I've already turned under that 1/8 of an inch and pressed to the wrong side. So that's something that you'll want to do. I've also notched out where that hemline is on my pattern. I just took my scissors and put a quick notch in at both of those sides here, so I can easily identify my hem area. What you'll want to do, and this might be easier to do while we have our pattern out and while we have our ruler semi-handy here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to measure, and it looks like the width of that sleeve opening is around 7.5 inches. And so what I'm going to want to do is I want to measure my elastic that I need, and I'm going to go ahead and mark it at 7.5. But then what I'm going to want to do is when you go ahead and thread this through your casing, you're going to want to shrink it 1/2 inch. So I'm going to mark my hem, and I'm going to go ahead and mark a 1/2 inch shorter than that. So put a mark at 7, just so you know where there'll probably be some overlap occurring when we go to enclose this into the actual casing of around the wrist area. So I went ahead and marked that. It's not necessary to do at this point, but it might make it a little bit easier. I don't think there's really a right or wrong length for your elastic casing, but it just depends on how tight it's going to be around the wrist. So that's just something to keep in mind if you want a lot of gathers and having it be fairly tight, or if you want to have a more relaxed wrist opening for you to put your wrist or your hand in and out of. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is again put that that stay stitching along the top edge of your sample. No need to back stitch. I'm going to run my edge right along the 1/8 of an inch line. Oh, let me get this ruler out of the way, it's throwing me off. So I'm just going to go ahead and run that raw edge of my fabric right along the 1/8 of an inch. Oh, I think I ran out of bobbin. Boo. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I have a couple bobbins that are already pre-wound just from previous projects, so I'm going to go ahead and reach around to my bobbin case, slip out this bobbin that was at one point tan, and I'm just going to go ahead and replace it with some gray. So if you have a bobbin case like this, there's a little bit of a thread sticking out. I want to trim that off. If you have a couple bobbins that just from previous projects, go ahead and keep those handy so that when you do run out when you're making these samples, you can continue working. If you only have one bobbin, I would suggest investing in some more so that you can not have to always change your threads constantly, or just rewind bobbins depending upon the samples, the thread colors that you're using. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to pick it up right where I stopped. I'm just going to do some overlapping stitches. And I got my bobbin to the top, so I should be good to go, and I'm just going to keep on sewing. Overlapped maybe about four stitches or so. And I'm running that raw edge right along that 1/8 inch marking. And when I get to the end, I'm just going to, no need to back stitch, I'm just going to go ahead and pull that to the front and then come back here and trim those thread tails where I had started that stitching at. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and close that underarm seam just like we have been doing. And I'm going to start at along the edge that I've already pressed up, because I think that I want to sew so that I'm sewing them down, not fighting against them. So I would suggest that you do that as well. I have my edges marked up, and I'm going to go ahead and stitch this right at 5/8 of an inch. all the way up and down the side of this project. I'm going to do a little back stitching. I want to make sure, all my stitching is okay. I feel like my machine's kind of acting a little funny. I might need to rethread that bobbin if I'm not happy with how the stitching is going on here. So I'm going to go ahead and raise up that presser foot. I feel like my bobbin's kind of spinning a little quickly in my bobbin case, a little bit faster than what it was before. But stitching seems to be okay, so I guess I'm just going to go ahead and move forward. Okay, the next step that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and, again, finger press this seam open that we just got done completing. Go ahead and finger press that open. Alright. Then I'm going to go ahead and fold that up along the hemline. And again, your pattern should indicate how much you turned up, and it was about let's see, a little over 3/4 of an inch is that turned up. Total with that 1/8 of an inch turn up, it was 1 inch. So 1 inch minus 1/8 is what your hemline should be at all the way around. And I have those notches that I have in mine. If you wanted to use your tracing paper and tracing wheel, that could also be a good option. So I'm going to go ahead and just measure this. Should be a little less than 1 inch. Okay. It should be around 7/8 is what we're looking for. If we turned up our 1/8, our 1/8 of an inch marking there. I'm still a little sideways on one side. Alright, there we go. Now I got it about 7/8. Got 7/8 right under right at this marking here. So I'm going to go ahead and put a pin in there so at least that one stays in place. And then I'm going to go ahead and measure it on the opposite side and then try to wiggle it around to make it work in between these pins that I'm putting in. It's a little bit trickier with that 1/8 of an inch fold up. I feel like it's just creating a little bit extra bulk that might be throwing my ruler off a little bit. If only my hand was a little bit smaller, I could get it in there, but it's not. Alright, hopefully that'll just roll up like right at 1 inch. Just a little bit shorter. Okay. There we go. And I've got 7/8 there. I'll go ahead and put a pin in there. Do a double check on that. Gosh, it keeps moving up on me. Okay, this spot is correct. And I'm just going to try to keep moving my way around, measuring. Alright, we're looking a lot better along this line. Maybe it just took a little bit for that folded edge to give in to my ways. Okay, and I'm just gonna still kind of working around the edge here. This one's creeping up on me. Alright, I can go ahead and put some pins in there. Put some pins in there. Yep, 7/8 looking good. Okay, now when we go ahead to put this casing in, what we're going to do is we're going to stitch stitch around this circle, keeping everything in place. Oh, that kind of got a hole over here. Yeah, that's looking good. But where we're going to leave open is we're going to start stitching, let's see, we're going to want to start stitching on one side of this underarm seam, and then stitch all the way around, keeping that casing in place, and then stop when we get right before we get to this other seam, because we need to insert our elastic and then run it around the corner. So what I need to do is I need to place my sample so that I can catch that thread. And when I'm stitching on the right side of the fabric. And what we need to do is we need to make sure that we are stitching right at that 7/8. We need to run up the edge of our fabric right along that 6/8, which is the 3/4. I don't think something's catching in my bobbin. I figured it out. It must have not just hooked properly on the underneath side, because I was like, that thing is flowing way too strangely. So I'm glad we got it solved. Okay. I'm going to trim up all these tails that are just a mess now. Alright, so when I place this sample, and I'm going to place it so I'm starting just towards me, or to the left of my seam, probably about 1/4 of an inch, and then 1/4 of an inch towards me or away from that seam, and then I'm going to run my my fold line, my hem line here that's been folded up along the 7/8 inch marking. I'm going to go ahead and put my pin in, and then what I can do is I can raise up my presser foot and make sure that I can kind of peek underneath of all that to make sure that it truly is grabbing all the fabrics that I need it to, and it is going through. So I'm going to go ahead and just go slowly again, making sure that my my folded edge is lining up with that 7/8 inch marking. Right. Alright, and it's important that we try to keep things as smooth as possible. I feel like I'm struggling a little bit with all these pins and whatnot, but try your best. I'm sure we can get it. Okay, just work your way around. You know what, I'm really, I think that what's going on with me is that I accidentally went off of my guideline here. If you guys have that, the magnetic tip that covers you, that sticks to that throat plate, I would go ahead and use it, because what was happening is that I wasn't able to see my line along my throat plate